Hi, good day everyone. Welcome to The Food Career. I'm Simon Dawson, Senior Lecturer at Cardiff Met University, and today we are joined by Jon Poole. Jon is the Chief Executive for the Institute of Food Science and Technology, or IFST. Jon, welcome and thank you for talking to me today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be involved in this.
Thank you. So first I'd like to ask if you can just explain a little bit about who you are and what you do in the IFST, please.
Okay, well, as you say, I'm Chief Executive, which means I have overall responsibility for the direction and activities within IFST. We are a professional body. IFST has been around since 1960 and is there to provide the professional recognition and registration for those that are involved in food science and technology. In order to perform what we do, we have a team of about 10 people. And we're involved in activities like putting on events, conferences, networking events, webinars, everything to give people, professionals in the industry, the opportunity to be able to enhance their careers. A particularly important part for us is also being able to support young people and encouraging young talent into the food sector.
Mm-hmm. So just from speaking about you now, going back a bit, could you explain how you got to work for the IFST in the first place?
Well, that's a bit of a convoluted story, to be honest, because I do not come from a food and food science background. So, yeah, I started off, in fact, in financial services. Many years ago, I was involved in legal and general and insurance and pensions, and then moved into the banking world with the Woolwich Building Society. So for many years, I was a bank manager. But after that, very quickly moved into training and development. And that was where I sort of started to get my expertise in training development and personnel, and decided eventually to set up my own training and development consultancy, which I did for about 10 years. So still no food in it yet. And after that, I worked for an organization called the Society of Chemical Industry, which is a similar institute to IFST. And within SCI, there were a number of fields. You can imagine in chemistry, you've got pharmaceuticals, you've got petrochemicals, you've got cosmetics, you've got fine chemicals, and within that there was an area for food and agriculture. And I then got invited to apply for the role at IFST, and I thought, well, food, that's just one narrow area compared with what I've been used to in chemicals. That should be very easy. So I applied for the job, and thank goodness I got it. But when I moved into IFST, I realized just how broad the food sector was. And in fact, what I thought was going to be quite a niche area was so vast and so wide in scope that it's still given me loads to play at.
So prior to you going into the food industry, did you realize how big it was?
No, I don't think I did. As I say, there was an element within SCI which was covering food and agriculture, but I don't think I realized just how specialized and broad it was. I mean, when you look at the whole food sector, and you ask people, you know, what is food science and what's involved in food, then you've got areas like sustainability, you've got areas like new product development. That's the one most people perhaps think of first. You've got to think about the food safety, food security, sensory science. I mean, that was a completely new one to me. I'd never come across. And then, of course, food engineering, agriculture. It's just so wide. And I don't think, if I look back, I mean, I've been in the food sector now for 10 years, so it's difficult to take myself out of that environment. But I don't think I had any idea.
Wow. So working where you are now, what kind of challenges do you come across in the IFST?
I guess there's two sorts of challenges that we face. Those relating to how we best deliver the services that we do to our members. So we've got around about 2,800 members at the moment, and we're growing as an organisation. So it's really important for us to be able to provide the right level of service to be able to look after those members. So that's around, providing the right level of professional recognition, the right sort of continuing professional development, and conferences and activities. So that's on the one side about how we run the organization, and those are one set of challenges. Then the other set of challenges, of course, are about what we're doing to support the food sector, what we're doing to help government, what we're doing to help professionals. And so those are the big challenges, I guess, like issues around nutrition, obesity, reformulation, issues around sustainability, food waste, energy, resource reduction. And of course, at the moment, we're facing the issue of how do we help to ensure that there's a safe and secure supply of food during the COVID-19 crisis. So there's a whole series of different challenges. There's sort of micro ones around the business, and the macro ones about what we're there to achieve.
Wow, so it is quite a diverse role and a diverse industry that you've got there as well. So do you think being a member of the IFST, how would that help like a student or a graduate or even a food professional excel in their career?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, Simon, because at the moment we're going through an exercise of trying to define what we see as the member proposition. What are we there to provide for our members? Mm-hmm. And what's becoming clear from that is that the life cycle of a member, starting, as you say, being a student member and then becoming an associate member and then a more senior member through to being a member and fellow of the Institute. Throughout that whole life cycle, if you like, the needs of members change, and therefore we need to be there to be able to provide support at all of those levels. Mm-hmm. So at a student level, primarily we're there to be able to provide support in terms of resources, encouragement, competitions to try and help to expand the minds of students, and also to give them experiences, if you like, to add to their CV. I'm sure we'll come to that later in this chat. Mm-hmm. As you move into your first role, then we need to be there to support in terms of perhaps career mentoring, but also being able to give advice and guidance for people when they're in their early jobs. As people move into their mid-careers, they're looking particularly at professional recognition, and towards retirement, then it's all about members wanting to contribute and add back into the industry. So we need to provide opportunities for that. Of course, that then goes full circle, because hopefully those really experienced members are supporting the younger generation as they come through. So we need to be there at all of those stages in people's professional careers.
Right. So I can see there is like this transition between, going from the early stages of a person's career, student-wise, then into a graduate, and then up and beyond. Yeah. Can anyone become an IFST member?
Anyone's probably a little bit broad. Pretty well anyone. We need to people need to be able to prove that they have a true interest in food science and technology. And one of the critical elements which would stop some is that anyone that is signing up as a member, whether they're a student or more senior professional, have to sign up to a professional code of conduct. Right. So that would preclude, say, just a member of the public with a slight interest in food joining. So it's primarily there for food professionals. But other than that, yes, we're welcoming of anyone. And of course, food science and technology is a very broad subject. So we have people in the organization that maybe started off in microbiology or in chemistry or even in physics. And of course, the mainstream of students who are studying food science and technology or nutrition. So we need to be able to appeal to that broad church of individuals. So yeah, anyone in that respect, yes, definitely.
Fantastic. So apart from just like IFST membership, is there any other types of like professional recognition that a student or a graduate or an early career person can get through the IFST?
Well, we would suggest people start off firstly as just student members, because it's very cheap to join. It's just £20 odd, £24 to join as a member. And once they're a student member, they get all of the benefits that they could get from being a professional member. They get a magazine once a quarter. They get, most importantly, to join in all the forums and events and activities. But that's just to become a student member. The second thing I would say from that is then don't just be a passive member, become an active member, because it's only through actively participating in things that you will gain in terms of your, helping you in your profession and your career. But then once you start to look at getting your first role, then we'd suggest that you start looking at professional recognition. We are under license with the Science Council, able to recognize people that are what we call registered scientists and then ultimately chartered scientists. And registered scientists is something that graduates, after a year or two experience in industry, which part of that might be what they gain during their placement year, can become professionally recognized as what we call an RSci, or registered scientist. So that's a great way in to provide that professional recognition and credibility in the industry.
Oh, fantastic. So they're like additional letters you can put after your name then?
They are, yes. If you're one for collecting letters, then that gives you a few extra letters after your name. And then after that, most likely after a few years in your role, you will then become what we call a member of the Institute with a capital M. So that you become an MIFST. And again, that's letters that you can use after your name. They're letters there for a purpose, though. They're there for people to recognize that you're a professional and that you take your career seriously. Awesome. One of the other things that comes with as a requirement for becoming a registered scientist, that you're expected to do continuing professional development. That's something which, if you've been involved in studying at university, should come quite naturally, because you're just expected to keep up with your professional development. It's very easy to just think, oh, I've got my degree, that's it now. But of course, beyond that, that's when you really start to learn, because you need to gain the experience, you need to keep up with emerging trends. And so it's really important that you keep up with continuing professional development, just to keep at the level that you're expected to be, that you need to do that. And that can involve going to events, going to conferences, reading material, research on the internet. All of those are experiences which you'd be able to record towards your CPD.
Fantastic. So do you think there's any extracurricular activities while studying either at school, college or university that could help start a career?
I think so. If you imagine that there is a cohort every year of students coming out looking for roles in the food sector, it is worth saying that the food sector is crying out for good people, but those good people need to be able to stand out. And I would recommend that anyone that is looking to get into the food sector looks to stand out from other people by adding experiences, if you like, to their CV. That can be as simple as being an active part of an IFST student group, or for that matter, other institute student groups. It could be about attending conferences. It could be actually speaking at a conference, or perhaps presenting a poster. All of these things are extracurricular activities, which means you can add it to your CV. More to the point, if you get as far as an interview, you can talk about it. And that's the thing that will really make you stand out. It also brings alive your study. I think what happens is, if you learn it theoretically, there's nothing better than actually getting some real experience to be able to see how what you've learned can be applied in practice. Networking events is another critical thing. I think people underestimate the importance of networking. Just at the moment, while we're unable to meet easily and freely with other people, I think that's the thing that many professionals are really missing, because the opportunity to just talk to other professionals on any subject, you suddenly find that you get engrossed in another subject, and you can learn so much more just from talking to other professionals.
Yeah, I mean, I do find though, because I've been to a lot of IFST conferences
Yeah.
and being a member of the Western branch, we set up a few of these as well. Just amazing the amount of people that you meet networking at these conferences, just random people you just go up to and have a conversation with.
Yeah.
Realize that you've either got something in common or there's an interest generated there somewhere, and it just builds up these links.
Yeah. Don't you find, Simon, that you go along and you're not sure what you're going to what the purpose is, and you think, well, maybe I won't bother tonight, and then you turn up and you meet a few people, and then all of a sudden you're into a conversation you just weren't expecting, and it's that sort of serendipitous sort of conversation which can really sort of to lead to all sorts of things, and it may even lead to future business that you never expected.
God, definitely, because we've generated research from it. I've had guests coming in to talk to students.
Yeah.
It's led to industry trips, so we're taking students into food companies, and also it's managed to get some students internships as well in jobs after they've graduated. So yeah, you're right. I can't say that enough, really.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is if you start to profile what makes a good food scientist or any scientist, you'd expect to, all the usual stuff that you'd expect on a CV, that they have the technical background and they have all that sort of stuff. You would not expect to see on the profile you need to be good at personal relations. But actually, the people that make it and expand their careers are those people that are actually people as well. They're able to talk to other people quite openly and freely. And of course, you've also got to be able to communicate your science, haven't you? So ultimately, you can have the best ideas in the world and the best analysis, but unless you're able to communicate it to others and turn it into reality, then it's all about communication at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think out of each of the people that I've spoken to, when I've been doing these like videos, that is the number one thing that's come out more than anything else is communication.
Yeah, definitely.
And being able to communicate to different people in different ways.
Yes.
Which is quite a challenge as well.
Yeah. Well, as I said in my introduction, I'm not a food scientist, but I end up going to a lot of events and sitting there and absorbing what people are telling me. And I think the best speakers that I see are those that they start off quite simply and they're talking about broad concepts, and then they ease you gently into the presentation. And by about halfway through, that's where my mind starts to sort of explode a little bit, maybe. But you can see that they're easing you into the subject. So hopefully, even if it's a topic which you're not used to or unfamiliar with, then you start to get into that mindset, and you can learn so many different topics. I mean, it's very easy to go to a conference on a topic which is exactly your subject that you're covering, but really great actually if some of the speakers that are maybe off topic for you'll learn quite a bit more from that.
Oh, definitely. So just for a final piece of advice, is there anything you can suggest that would help students either going to university or currently at university that will help with their career? Things that they can put in their CV or cover letter or those sort of areas.
Yeah. Many of the extracurricular activities that I mentioned before, I think, are critical for the CV, as well as helping them to, people to learn. It's also about adding to the CV and having things to talk about. Mm-hmm. In terms of the CV itself, I think it's really critical that people are genuine and put in their CV. I'm sure you've heard it many times before, but put in their CV things that they can actually talk about. That are genuine to them. If it's just sort of bland statements that could apply to anyone, then that's not really going to make you stand out. And when you're looking through CVs, I think, what do they say? Something like 20 seconds per CV. You've got to stand out very quickly. But you need to think then beyond that in terms of assuming your CV is successful in getting you in front of somebody, then you need to be able to talk about your experiences. So any experiences are good. And the great opportunities, of course, are even in terms of the jobs you have, your holiday jobs and weekend jobs, because you can even make those apply and align to have something to talk about.
Yes. Because they talk a lot about transferable skills as well. Because I think when you're like a student or a graduate, you won't have years and years experience in the food industry, but what you do have is these transferable skills.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? On CVs, you sometimes have people put hobbies and interests at the back, and I have to say, those that just sort of say, "Oh, I like cinema and socializing," is not really going to not going to really impress particularly. But anything that is able to demonstrate transferable skills, absolutely. I mean, take me for example. I started off in financial services. How have I ended up here? But it's primarily because of the transferable skills that I've taken from different jobs and applied them in different roles to where I am today.
Yes.
I have to say, having reached this point in my career and sort of happened upon the food sector, perhaps partly by accident, it's a great sector to be in. And when I look back, is there a way that I would have said, well, I should have joined the food sector earlier because I really enjoy it? But the answer is probably no, because I could have not got to where I am at the moment without the career path I have.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, one thing I would say from that perhaps others might learn from is that don't feel that you've got to formulate your career path. Absolutely. I mean, some people don't anyway. They prefer to go by chance. But I would take the opportunities as they come up, because you never know where it's going to take you. I would have never known when I was working as a building society manager that I would end up in this role in the food sector. But it's the right path for me, and I just took the opportunities when they were there.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, don't say no to any opportunities. Give them a try. You never know. And you never know where it's going to take you.
Wow, so true. Jon, it's been great talking to you today. As the chief exec, I'm sure you're very, very busy at the moment, so thank you. Take care, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon. Been a pleasure.
Thank you.